Welcome back, everyone, to the Property Journey Podcast, episode 21, and we are following on from the preview of the budget to now discussing the budget. The aftermath of it. I was glued to it, Roy. Was sitting watching it as it was being announced. Some of it was somewhat... I don't know what way you would describe it. Shocking, nearly, the way that it was just coming out. That was it being said, done. That's what we're doing, and moving on to the next subject basically. There was a lot to unpack for my small mind, but luckily enough, there's a lot of sources out there that have been able to sort of at least diagnose some of the changes rather quickly, but we're still waiting on all the documentation to come out, when time frames are going to come in. But as many of our listeners may know, some of the time frames were rather short when it comes to the changes. So first thing I wanted to touch on was it seems to be business owners and employers got the biggest of the hits. Minimum wage is now going to be going up to £12.21. 18 to 20-year-olds are now going to be getting paid £10 an hour. And the second thing that got hit then was the employer's national insurance. Thresholds have now dropped from £9,000 to employers paying national insurance contributions from salaries over 5,000 now. So it was a £4,000 drop. So that's immediately going to be a big hit. Not to mention then that the rate that they're paying has went from 13.8 to 15.
Yeah.
Business owners are really going to be getting the brunt of it.
Absolutely. It's just, where is the sense in that? I appreciate from an employee point of view, they look at how much money they receive in their bank, and that's it. But if you take a look the next time you get your pay slip, and it'll show exactly how much is your tax, your contributions, that's what the employer pays, and the employer then pays more on top of that. So effectively, I was speaking to a couple of business owners over the last couple of days following this, and it's simply there's a mixed consensus. One business owner is planning to cut staff because it just doesn't pay, and the other one is planning to simply push prices up. So no matter what, there's no win-win there, because to cut staff, then that means you're reducing the workforce. So that means there's going to be increase in job losses and unemployed. And then to put your prices up, well, then your end user is then going to have to pay more. So the employee, the worker, is actually going to spend more out of their monthly income.
It really is a catch-22 when you think about it, because as you say, by doing this, they're trying to raise the amount of money that they're getting for tax, all the rest of it. But the employers now sitting with a situation, as you said, what do they do next?
Yeah.
So do they put the prices up, of which the employee or the general public that's now receiving the extra money in their pay packet is now then going to have to go out and spend more? So their fish and chips at the weekend's going to be more, their shopping's going to be more, because as they say, a lot of small businesses, yes, they're saying that may not end up contributing to this. Their tax may stay the same. I know what they're trying to do here is go after the bigger corporations. But if you're hitting Sainsbury's is then going to look at, well, we need to increase our prices here.
Exactly.
And that's going to slam everyone. So, it's a catch-22. We now need to see what the fallout of it is, how many small businesses are going to be affected, and it could be detrimental.
And it's going to stop those entrepreneurs, those who are hungry, who are maybe planning on growing their business, or maybe going to start up a new business. Well, you're not going to do that. You're not going to, even if you are a tradesperson and you're maybe started out your own and you're doing really, really well, and you're thinking about taking on somebody, well, you're immediately going to cut that, because it's just not going to pay.
No matter what, as I always say, when it comes to tax, and we're probably in agreement, you have to pay your tax no matter what, and what I always like to say is I want to see my tax going to something that that it's actually being used properly. For example, roads infrastructure, whatever it happens to be, if I know my tax is going to that, I'm happy enough. But it's as I say, if it's going to start beginning hurting the economy, as you say, entrepreneurs, not maybe the knock-on effect of it, it's going to be quite difficult then to see growth. and they see new potential coming through. So that was the real kicker. So it was, and I know that the government says that, you know, employees' national insurance hasn't increased, and income tax hasn't increased, and VAT hasn't increased. That was the big thing that they were saying. But no matter what they were going to do here, and especially when it comes to the employers, it's still going to have a knock-on effect on the employees.
It all comes back to the employee. It's a subtle way that they were, in my view, very crafty, because yes, they wanted to be seen. I think that the term used was, we're not going to hit the working class or the working people, but they have just
in a roundabout way,
just behind the back. They've hit them. That's simply it.
So there was a lot to unpack, as I say. There was a new COVID corruption office going to be created to investigate all the businesses that diddled the government out of money. Right. They're going to try and claw some of that back 3 years later. Lots of different things. There was carers allowance increased to 16 hours a day or hours a week. There was new plans for employee rights. I know there was quite a bit of that coming out in the news beforehand, which again, that is going to have a knock-on effect on businesses. Don't know if you heard about it, but it's essentially people coming in the door straight away are going to have the same rights as employees that have been there for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Fuel duty stays the same, which is a positive. The funny thing was that there was alcohol duty. She reduced it, so the price of a pint is now a penny cheaper, which we're not going to see because the employer's national insurance contribution has gone up. So
the drink will probably go up even still, not down.
So I don't know why that got a big cheer in Parliament, but I don't think we're going to see that 1p change anytime soon. So what I wanted to touch on then was, we in the previous podcast had touched on capital gains tax. So we were unsure as to what way the rates were going to go for that. I don't know, we didn't discuss the actual percentages in the last podcast, but I am going to give them today. So the low rate is increasing from 10 to 18%. High rate then is jumping from 20 to 24. And the good thing, I suppose, for anyone that's invested in property is that the residential rate is staying the same at 18 and 24. So if I get that right, then any profits that you've made on selling a second or a third or a fourth home or an investment property, you're still going to be paying the same amount of capital gains on the profits then.
Yes, but then the allowance then would be reduced. Like years ago, it used to be you were allowed to make a profit of 12,000 per year per person, and then that was reduced down. So that's removed as well.
So essentially, you're just going to be paying tax outright, but the actual rate hasn't changed. The threshold's just dropped away now.
Exactly. Yes.
Business asset disposal relief. We touched on it in the last podcast as well. It was currently sitting at a rate of 10%. April 25 going to 14%. April 26 is going to 18%. So they were basically phasing that in because they said that they didn't want to affect businesses and growth and stuff like that there. Slightly hypocritical.
Yeah.
But we'll not touch on it. That's the rates anyway. We knew that there was going to be a rate change in that relief. And it's happening, but it's going to be phased in. So you can see by my sheet here, Roy, I really was glued into it. So big one then, inheritance tax.
Yes.
We knew again there was going to be changes. We've now got those changes. There's a freeze in the thresholds up to 2030. So that's not going to, any of the thresholds currently aren't going to change. The big thing I think that they did change in it then was pensions that are unused are now taxable.
That's right.
So from what I've noted down here, I think it's up to £1 million in assets can go to the surviving spouse. I might get that wrong. I might have noted that down wrong, and that could be completely different. That may be in under the agricultural reform?
Well, no, the agricultural reform one, they've changed that. It used to be always the case that if you had agricultural land and you died and your beneficiaries received that, then they hadn't to pay a penny of inheritance tax. Whereas now they've removed that allowance completely. Also for businesses, it was the same concept. If you owned a business and you died, it would go to your family if or beneficiaries tax free. Whereas now, once it's worth over £1 million, then you're taxed after that. So initially you might think £1 million, that's a lot. But in today's terms, the way inflation has risen, the way prices have risen and everything, £1 million isn't really a lot. Like for instance, for land, up until now, land could be selling at about 30,000 an acre. So that means it's the best part of about 34 acres, 33, 34 acres, and then that's you at that threshold. The vast majority of your typical farmer out there in Northern Ireland has about 30 to 40 acres. So that means your typical farmer is now on the cusp of having some sort of inheritance tax bill, which quite simply they'll not have, because again, the farmer who has 30, 40 acres, they maybe have a job. They're not farming as a full-time job. I use the term, it's a hobby. It's their tradition, what have you. There just won't be the money there to then pay that inheritance bill.
I think I've got that mixed up just looking at my notes there, but I was going to come on to that. So essentially, as you say, the assets now over £1 million are going to be taxable.
Yeah.
That rate is going to be an effective rate, as they say, is at 20%. Mm-hmm. So there's different reliefs out there. It's all being conjoined, and the effective rate at the end of all that, whenever they come up with the figure, is going to be 20%. I was reading in the news then that Hilary Benn, the Northern Ireland Secretary, says that the majority of Northern Ireland farmers won't be affected. The flip side of that then was the Farmers Union reps were out then and discussing it, and says that that's all well and good because in England the farmlands are all essentially leased out. Mm-hmm. Whereas back here, as you've noted, the farm buildings, the fields, the equipment, everything that's involved within the farm, 9 times out of 10 is actually owned by the farmer. Mm-hmm. So they're asset rich and cash poor, yes. Which is what we discussed in the preview, that they don't have much, but yes, they may have got a big tractor sitting, yeah. But that's an asset to the farm that allows them to be able to do it. Yeah. So for him to come out and say that the majority of farmers won't be affected, I think he's maybe wrong on that. There's going to be a lot that, as you say, is about to maybe be on the cusp of that, and there will be a bill. Yeah. That change, did we say, is not going to come in for another 2 years?
2026.
2026.
So I suppose I always try to see the positive on everything here. Yes, this is a tax that's coming, but my experience is traditionally a lot of farmers maybe wouldn't make wills, maybe wouldn't have any inheritance planning, and this could be the kick in the back that they needed to actually think about it, because the number of disputes that we come across and see and fights over farms and estates simply because a landowner hasn't made a will or hasn't planned ahead and started to gift it out to sons and children and what have you. So simply just now's the time to really think ahead, make those decisions. And if you can't make the decisions, speak to a solicitor, and a good solicitor will sit down with you and work out your options and help you with that.
Because because realistically, if you don't do your inheritance planning, mm-hmm. and you want to, for example, pass the family farm down to a son or a daughter, or sons or daughters, mm-hmm. Whatever your personal choice is, it's them that's going to be left with the tax bill to pay. Yeah. And that may mean that part of your farm is going to have to be sold off to then pay for the tax bill.
And then to get a bit deeper into it, farmers can be very competitive over who owns land, and it's a generational challenge. And it's always, great for a family to say, oh, they bought this land and they bought that off such and such and the neighbours, and they now have more land, whereas that farmer, that family, those generations have spent all those years working extremely hard, buying the land, paying it off very quickly, and then maybe to have to lose part of it to a competing farmer to pay their tax bill simply because they didn't plan ahead.
And that's why I wanted to touch on that, because it's like potentially when it gets to £1 million, 20% on anything after that, you could be sitting, say, any assets after that 200,000, you're sitting with a potential 20 grand tax bill. I don't think I'd want to be passed on a 20 grand tax bill. Or as you continue to go up the figures there, you're at 50 or 100 or anything after that. So that was kind of the inheritance tax, and the agricultural kind of fed into that, the relief. Corporation tax capped at 20%, 25%. It's all right.
Which is too high. Like, I've definitely seen a big difference in the business, just the amount of tax over the last few years and what you're paying. And again, I know it's holding me back from growing the business, because every time you think to yourself, right, well, here's a new service that we could provide, you start to price out, the costing of it, taking your staff costs now take your tax out of it, and you just stop and you think to yourself, no, it's just not worth the hassle. It's completely not worth it.
But the biggie, well, actually, I'll just make a quick note on these ones. Non-DOMs now completely scrapped. There's going to be a new scheme coming in for it. Let me see, was there anything else? No. The biggie then that we want to talk about is the SDLT increase.
The one that there was, at least the rest of everything that we discussed here now was all, drip fed, all discussed, all out there. We basically knew that was all coming, and it was as quick as she could say, and the stamp duty's increasing 2%.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
I genuinely think that she spent 15 seconds on it, if not shorter. It was just said and moved on. Because I actually had to rewind and listen to it again. Once I'd finished listening to it, I was kind of going, did I hear that right? Now, just to clarify, that is the stamp duty on second homes.
Yes.
But it still had a kicker of an effect on obviously people that are using property as an investment.
Yeah. So now this recording is going out very, very soon after the budget here. So we're still going through all the information in detail. But what we have at the minute is basically a second home owner who then was previously paying 3%. It's now jumping up and starting at 5%. So anything over 40,000, you're hit, and it's 5%. That was something that was just not in any way predicted. I was trying to think of a positive on it. The only positive I can put on it is, to be fair, this stamp duty came in maybe about 6-7 years ago, and there hasn't been a change in it in 7 years. So I suppose this change, well, it's inevitable.
Probably due at some point.
But to put it in instantly was
yeah,
very, as they say in the country, very cute, because nobody had time to do anything. And I really, really feel for anybody who was right bang in the middle of doing a transaction and be hit with this whammy. Like, I know I spent Wednesday night running around. I think it was 10 o'clock before I was finished. I was on the phone to clients all afternoon, trying to see, prioritising who can we help, how can we help them. And there's some clients, I was out at their house at 10 o'clock on Wednesday night getting contracts signed to get home, get them emailed, get locked in, get it completed, done and dusted, to save them thousands and thousands of tax.
Yeah, because that was the biggest kicker, was the fact that was maybe not so much even the rate. Yes, the rate was big, in terms of a 2% change, but it was the fact that it's coming in tomorrow, and that was just it. I think they knew exactly what they were doing when they done that, because as you say, if someone's locked into a contract, that's them, they're locked in. But if it hasn't got across the line yet, then they were going to be subject to that after it completed. You know, so it was a big kicker. Now, as you say, this is going out, you know, very, very quickly after the budget has been announced. There's still a lot of fine print to come out. There's still a lot of understanding. So, you know, nothing at the minute really from what people are coming out and saying is complete gospel yet, because we're still waiting on a lot of the fine print to come out. So, you know, that SDLT one was a big one. When it comes to the investors. Now, what they're claiming that they've done that for is to essentially stave off investors, people buying second, third, fourth, fifth homes, to free up the market for first-time buyers. You know, is it going to have that big an effect? I think if you want to buy a second home or you're buying investment property, you're going to go and do it.
Yeah, it's, in my view, it's not going to make much of a difference. If anything, it's going to come back and it's actually going to be hurting the renters more, because now a landlord is looking at this saying, right, well, I'm buying this house. This is now what my new stamp duty is going to be. That's an extra cost. So how are they going to get that cost? They're going to be starting to creep rents up now over the next few months to claw that back. Very, very simple. So the last time, 6-7 years ago, when that rate was introduced, it didn't really have an impact on the property market at all. The only difference that time was you had about 6 months, you knew it was coming in, and effectively you did 9 months worth of work in 3 months, because anybody who was going to buy for that year bought at the first part of the year instead of later on in the year. So yes, that year was fairly quiet for transactions, but house prices had no impact. And then once those investors basically got over that hurdle of buying those houses, the stamp duty, then they just started buying again, and then it kept going. So my prediction is going to be the same now. It'll maybe be a wee bit quiet for a couple of weeks here till everybody, you know, sucks in a bit of breath and shakes their head about it. But then it's just a matter of they'll refind their figures and put the rents up.
And it's back to business as usual.
Back to business. Now, the only place where I think it could have an impact, now what I'm talking about here is that your typical house, investment house in Northern Ireland. I appreciate the likes of England, you know, the house prices are considerably higher, and you know, it could have a big impact or a different impact, but I'm only focusing here on my market.
Yeah.
The holiday homes may take a wee bit of a stall at the minute, because you know, particularly the likes of the North Coast, those house prices are significantly high, and this stamp duty will make a big difference to it. So it'll maybe cool demand a wee bit, or it might slow prices. But again, to come back to the positive, there's a positive in everything. The likes of the North Coast, prices were selling for maybe 30, 40, 50,000 over asking. Well, if they're selling now for 10 or 20 over asking,
yeah,
well,
it's still over asking.
Still doing really well. So, you know, you have to think of the positive.
And I know you did say there, like I know we had previously touched on as well, there was I think there's different potential rates coming in as well for short-term rentals and stuff as well, so we are keeping our eye to the ground about that. But personally, I feel that when a lot of these changes come in, you either kick off about it for a while, and then you just deal with it. You know, that a lot of the times that is what happens. You know, we all kick up a bit of a storm, but you know, they're in now, the changes are coming. So we just got to deal with them. And you know, in a year's time we'll forget probably that the rate was, you know, 3%. It's now 5%. That's what we're dealing with. So
if anything, people might be looking back saying, I wish I had bought an extra house or 2 houses when it was only 3%.
Exactly. You know, so it is. People just take it on the chin, like, you know, move on, and we'll see in 6 months' time or whatever it happens to be then what way the outcome is. I know, judging by me looking at the market data and stuff like that, there wasn't a severe hit came in when the budget was being announced. Usually you can kind of tell what way the market's reacting, how well the budget's going. It was fairly subdued, would be the word that I would use. Just a quick note, obviously we've got the US presidential elections coming in next week. So that's going to be another kicker as to what way kind of the market's going, the economy goes, all the rest of it. So it'll be worthwhile keeping an eye out for. But very briefly, that was the budget summed up. If you really want to go, and I'm going to say this to your listeners, if you want to go and read the 170 pages of the budget that was released, I wouldn't, because I did, and there's a lot in there. If you really do want to try and understand it, you really need an economics head on you if you want to understand that. But that's it in a nutshell, Roy. Anything else? Final thoughts?
No. I'm still getting over it. But here, next podcast we'll be back to property. We'll be upbeat, positive, and leading the way. So anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. That's episode 21. That's the budget summed up very, very quickly. And thanks, Roy, for giving us a wee bit of an insight there. Thank you.